Well, hello everybody, and happy Mother's Day. It is Mother's Day weekend, and it's also time to do the weekend video. Get ready. Sometimes I will try to do a theme-oriented video. Like if it's Easter, I tried doing one on the resurrection, but today I got a phone call, and I didn't know what I was going to do the video on, and somebody asked me. Uh, he called me. He was on his way to a little gathering where he likes to share the gospel with people. And he said, Jeff, doesn't it say somewhere that Jerusalem is our mother? And I don't know if it was the wording or something because it was vaguely familiar to me. And I was like, yeah, it would have to be something Paul said. And of course, looked it up and oh yeah, that was in Galatians. And he didn't word it correctly, but it is in Galatians. So I guess we're gonna do something on that today, and but you got to have a little bit of a background on what's going on in this whole letter that Paul wrote to the Galatians. Paul was kind of ticked off. He was upset. He had taught the Galatians the gospel of peace and grace, in which he explained to them that the law of the old covenant was abolished, and the gospel of peace itself is the new covenant, and it is the announcement of that new covenant. And so then he leaves, and then he gets word that the Galatians, there's a little bit of disputing among them, and they're troubled. Uh, and turns out that a good many of them have decided to start obeying the law again, and to demonstrate their works through getting circumcised, which would be in obedience to the law. And so Paul writes the letter, and he gets straight to the point very quickly in the beginning of it. And he says, look, you have really lost what I taught you, and I want to explain something to you very, very quickly. And what I have, because I have grievances with you. He said that you had seemed to have chosen to go under the law, and that is not what I preached to you. I know of those who do preach to you, and they are all in Jerusalem. And he spoke of Peter and James and the others in Jerusalem, and he talked about how they were preaching a law of circumcision and obedience to the law, and that was not the gospel of grace that he preached. And so in other parts of the letter, he tells them that they're bewitched. And in other parts of the letter, he tells them that you who want to go under the law, you who even try to obey any single law, you are fallen from grace. And stop it. He's basically saying, stop this foolishness right now. In chapter 4 of that letter, he is trying to make his point why they're being foolish. And that's where we find this reference to Jerusalem and the mother thing. So I'm gonna read you a section of it, and I'm gonna start out with let's see, verse 21. Verse 21 is where he says, "Tell me, you that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman by a promise." In other words, the one who was born of the bondwoman, that was Abraham's idea of how to bring about the promise that God promised him in his covenant. And that was his own works, him trying to make the promise of God come true. By doing something, and that, of course, the promise did not come through what he did by having a baby by another woman. Okay, so he goes on. He says, "These things which things are an allegory? In other words, this which happened with Abraham, where he produced a child by a bondwoman, but the one who received the promise was by his wife, who God promised him through that a seed would come, and so which things are an allegory? Allegory is simply what I'd like to call it's a picture of a truth. So this whole situation with the child of the bondwoman and the child of the free woman uh, was was the difference, because the child of the bondwoman, was also in bondage, but the child of the free woman was born free. So he continues and said, which things are an allegory? These are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar. Hagar was the bondwoman that Abraham tried to make the promise come through, because he was not waiting for the promise to come from God. These are a picture that was of the covenant, the old covenant, which gave us the law. Mount Sinai is a reference to that's where the law was given. Okay, which gendereth to bondage. The law is bondage. For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her. He's referring to Jerusalem because he was talking about how the pillars of Jerusalem, which is Peter and James, John, how they've got all of Jerusalem under the bondage of the law. They're preaching the law. And so he's saying this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, that answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free. Now he's talking about the Jerusalem that comes of the new covenant. See, that's also an allegory of Jesus, which is above. He always referred to, or not always, but oftentimes he referred to, when it came to the gospel, it was a gospel of Christ, who was above. And so, but Jerusalem, which is above Christ, is free, which is the mother of us all. Now, that's very important. He's saying, which is the mother of us all. He's saying that that freedom is the mother of us all, even you who want to be under the law. He says in other letters, actually, and it might have actually been in Galatians, but he actually says anybody who tries to say that the old covenant is still in effect, and that the law is still in effect, you're blinding yourself completely to this freedom of grace and righteousness by the faith of Christ, and not of your own. He says you're blinding yourself to it. And he further down, he says, nevertheless, what does the scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. Cast out that law thinking, cast out that old covenant, because it is old, because you are heirs of the new covenant, and you are not going to see it if you still teach and speak as though the old covenant and the law are still in effect. Cast it out. Remember what I taught you. It's revolutionary. Have a revolutionary week.